Okay, so for today's math, we're going to be on page number 13. And then the table of contents I've updated for yesterday and then for today. So if you can hit the pause button on the video, then you can make sure your table of contents are up to date. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to create an upside down, very wide V, so an upside down one. And then on the left-hand side, you're going to put your numbers 0 through 4. And then on the other side, you're going to put 5 through 9. Okay, so this should be review as far as rounding. Okay, this is what we're going to be working on, but rounding with decimals and not whole numbers. Okay, so for review, when you round a number, so for the number, for example, let's work with a whole number first. Let's say the number 47. Okay, if I wanted to round this number to the nearest, let me add another number here, 247. If I wanted to round this number to the nearest tens, this is my tens place, right? The 7 is my ones, the 4 is my tens, and the 2 is my hundreds. So if I wanted to round to the nearest 10, I'm going to look to the number to the right of that number I'm trying to round. And that 7 is going to tell me what's going to happen to this number that I'm rounding. So the 7, right? 0 through 4, the number stays, this number would stay the same. But if this number to the right is 5 or more, then this 4 becomes a 5. So because this 7, right, falls on this side of the mountain, we are going to round this number up. So the 2 stays the same. That's the number to the left of that number. We're not rounding to the hundreds, we're rounding to the tens. So this 4 now becomes a 5. And then because we're rounding to the nearest 10, this 7 is now going to become a 0. Because if we're rounding to the nearest tens, there should not be any ones. We're rounding to a 10. So if we counted by 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, right? I could get up to 250, right? I can't get up to 257 or 247 by counting by tens, right? So that is an example of rounding by whole number. Now we're going to follow the same rules with decimals, okay? Same rules. So you're gonna go ahead and copy down my notes here. These are your steps. It's really only 3 steps. The 4 is just reminding you that the other numbers, right? The numbers on the left stay the same. So I am going to take a photograph of this when I'm done with this video, and so I'll upload a picture of this into Google Classroom, so you can simply open up the photo and then make your notes. Okay, so what are the rules for rounding, right? So again, we're going to circle your place you are rounding to. Okay, so here's my example down here. I have a decimal, but I'm rounding to a decimal, not a whole number, right? So all of these numbers to the left are my whole numbers, and then here are my decimals. So if I have to round this number to the nearest tenth, I need to find my tenth, okay? And it says, number 1, circle your place you are rounding to. So if I'm rounding to the 10th, here's my first step. I'm just going to circle, yikes, I'm just going to circle this number, okay? Step number 2, look to the right. Great, I could do that. I'm going to look to the right, and now I'm looking at the number 6. Okay, step number 3, if that number is 5 or greater, it is, I am going to add one more to my circled number. Okay, maybe I'll kind of add that in there. Add one more to circled number. Okay, so I'm going to add one more to the circled number. Number 4, step 4 says all the numbers to the left stay the same. So here's my focus. Any numbers that fall to the left stay the same. So this 237 stays the same. The decimal point stays the same. Because this number was a 6, right? According to my rounding roller coaster, I'm going to add 1 to my circled number. So a 5 becomes a 6. I'm going to add 1. Okay. All right. Now, numbers to the right of my circled number, they become a 0. So the 6 becomes a 0. Okay. So this is my answer. Now, again, I didn't even have to put a 0 there, because if I'm rounding, this is an equivalent decimal. 237 and 6/10. This still reads 237 and 6/10 because there are 0 hundredths, right? Okay, so that is all we're going to be practicing today. So if I'm going to do another one, so let's say example number 2. And this time I want you to round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so again, you need to know your place value, and you guys do have your place value chart in your notebook, right? Page number 3 in your notebook, you have your place value chart, and then you have the other big one. Okay, so always use your resources. That's what this is for. Okay, so let me see. Let me make up a number here. Okay, so there is my whole number in decimal. So if I'm rounding to the nearest hundredth, I'm going to find my hundredth, 10th, hundredth. I'm going to circle it, right? Back up at the top, circle your place you are rounding to. So here, I'm rounding to the hundredth. So I'm going to circle that number. Step number 2, look to the right. Okay, so I like the habit of just drawing an arrow. So I'm looking at that 2. Step number 3, if that number is 5 or greater, this number is not 5 or greater, it's 4 or less. My number that I've circled stays the same. So this 8 stays the same. Okay? All right. Step 4, all of the numbers to the left stay the same. So all of these numbers to the left of my circle, even this one here, this 3, right? All these numbers stay the same. So I'm going to copy the 425, and there's 3/10 there. The 8, we said, stays the same because the 2, right? The 4 or less, the circle number stays the same. So the 8 stays an 8. Okay, numbers to the right, 0 is your name. So this 2 now becomes a 0. Okay, so my number rounded to the nearest hundredth is 425 and 38 hundredths. 0 there is an equivalent decimal. There are 0 thousandths, so that's still the same answer. So if I were to highlight this, just so you can kind of see, right, what the changes were. The 8 stays the same. The 2 becomes a 0 because you're rounding to the nearest hundredth. There can't be any thousandths. Okay, same thing here. If you want to just see what I changed, the 5 became a 6, and then that 6 was rounded, becomes a 0, right? Because we're rounding here to the nearest tenth. Okay, guys, I hope this video helped.